Hello, everyone. Let's welcome Brandon Cutler to Dragon Talk.
Yay!
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello, everybody. Hey, Greg. Hey, Shelly.
We are very glad to have you.
This is very exciting.
I'm excited to be here.
This is really great for a lot of folks in the D&D community because they may have only really found out recently about your D&D fandom. But how long have you been rolling the dice and playing D&D?
I want to say about 4 years now is when I stumbled upon it. I stumbled upon, like I'm sure a lot of people nowadays, I stumbled on Critical Role, and that kind of hooked me. And then that's where I started buying all the books and then like branching out and trying to find people to play with and whatnot.
Nice.
So did you have any interest in D&D before? Like what got you into even Critical Role?
That was watching that show Tabletop with Will Wheaton on Geek and Sundry, and just blowing through every like tabletop game that there was. And then it kept my YouTube just kept recommending me this Critical Role series, and I was like, I can't watch 4-hour like episodes of something. I don't even know what that is. And after I went through every tabletop game that show had, I was like, all right, I got nothing else now. Like, I got to check it out. And so I just had it on in the background while I was just doing other things, and just kept hearing them laugh as they're playing this game, and kept wondering like, what is this? Like, they're role playing, but like, do they go outside and like LARP what their characters did or something, or like what goes on with this game? I'm like, I've always heard of Dungeons and Dragons, but I still don't understand the grasp of it. And then just watching hours and hours and hours of it, you just get it, and you just get it hooked, and I want to play now. I want to buy the monster manual and see what they're fighting and see what it says in the book, like that the characters don't know or something.
Wow, that's awesome. Amazing.
Yeah.
So you've always had like a kind of an interest in gaming in general, I guess, if you were watching tabletop.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of always been from video games, board games, just kind of that's my whole like childhood growing up has been just gaming.
So which has maybe prepared you for our current situation in which many of us are just home right now playing games.
Yep. That's me and the wife have both put about 70 and 80 hours on Animal Crossing already. It's been out like a week.
Yeah, that game was very fortuitously timed for its release.
Yeah, definitely was.
I was gonna say you put 70 hours in one day
already too. I was like, man, if it wasn't like quarantine times right now, would I have been able to see as much of this game as I can?
I would think not.
Yeah,
probably not.
So a lot of folks are gonna know you from your role in All Elite Wrestling. And then how long have you been doing that? Like, has that always been a dream of yours, going into this type of entertainment?
Yeah, to be a wrestler, that was always my dream as a kid, is to become a wrestler for like the WWE and thing. That was like growing up, that was the main goal, is like, playing video games. It was always playing No Mercy, and then any physical activity was like wrestling kind of a thing. And so as early as I can remember, I'd be watching wrestling, and like that was when going to college I was like, well, what do you want to be? And I'm like, I got no other answer than like, I'd love to be a wrestler. So, trying to take college courses with that in mind is always weird. I was like, well, I guess I'll just try to go for other normal jobs. But because, there's no clear cut way of like how to become a wrestler. You take this class and get these credits, and like, there's nothing.
Right.
And so like, I kind of stumbled through real life for a while still trying to handle like, okay, maybe I'll be a wrestler on the independent scene. Maybe that's where you get picked up or something. And then All Elite Wrestling came around at the beginning of last year. And that was just with my friends, Matt and Nick, the Young Bucks, that they kind of put all that together. And so graciously kind of incorporated me into it as well. So like that was a thing that hasn't even, it could have never been a dream because it just developed last year. So it's kind of almost, I say it's beyond a dream, where it's like, no, you're not going to go into WWE. Your friends are going to create a wrestling company, and then you're going to get into that wrestling company with them. So it's kind of that of like, oh, well, it's this weird twist of life that, you could have never dreamed up.
Yeah. Well, and people say, there's always that opportunity is going to come no matter what. And so you always want to be prepared for when it does drop. And it sounds like you had all of the right things in place just for that opportunity.
Yeah, it really is that. It's that saying, like you're saying, of always be prepared, because then if you're not prepared, the opportunity will just pass you by. So if I wasn't wrestling at that time, because I got back into wrestling in 2018, I took a little break again, just like stumbling through life and trying to just get married and have kids, and like, okay, I guess the wrestling might never happen, I guess, but I'd like to have a family though, and not give that up too. So that was some of those years I quit wrestling, and then just tried to focus on having a family and everything. And then when I got back into wrestling, funny enough, the next year after I get back into wrestling is when this whole thing kind of blows up, and we're on TNT now.
That is amazing, because it hasn't even been that long that it's actually been in existence. So you met my son before we went live, Quinn. He wants to be a wrestler. That he has always gravitated towards. He's always been very physical, but so are lots of little boys. But then he also is. He's very acrobatic. Like we were saying, he taught himself how to do front flips and back flips, and now he's moved into like handstands, but like handstands off my husband's shoulders, and like
nice.
Like he loves to do like any kind of tumbling thing, and he's also loves to perform. So like, yes,
he's fit for it already. Look at that.
He is like, so I really don't know, because like you said, like you can't just take a class and like major in wrestling, but so what do you do? Like what was your path? And like when you're saying like I got back into wrestling and out, like what does it mean to get back into it?
Yeah, so what normally happens is there is wrestling schools around, and like especially back when I started in like 2004, like it's all word of mouth. Like you can't just Google wrestling schools near me or something. It was, you just hear word of mouth, or you catch wind of it or something. Or back then it was,
is it like a fight club, like secret, like
well back then it was. Now I'm sure you could Google like wrestling schools near me or something, or most major states will have a pretty reputable one at this point now, and that would be the equivalent of like going to like a vocational school of like, oh, I want to learn how to weld. It'd be like, I want to learn how to be a wrestler. You could like look up wrestling schools now. Like now it's much easier than it was in 2004. And so how I did actually do it is the Young Bucks, my friends, they went to a wrestling school. And we were all so young at the time. I was about like 12 or 13 when they started going. And so they're not going to accept that young of kids in a wrestling school, like most won't. Would just come back after their trainings, and they would show all of us, like my older brother and the Young Bucks' oldest brother, Matt, would both come back and show us, like the younger kids, everything they learned. And so we would kind of learn secondhand from them. And so we were kind of ready to go by the time we were of age. Like when I turned 18, I was already like, all right, I'm ready to have my first match.
That is awesome.
Hey, buddy.
Talking about wrestling school. He's got part of his wrestling costume on.
Wait, he has his wrestling costume on.
The other part, will you stand up on the bed so we can see your costume?
Oh, look at that. Oh, he's ready.
Oh, that's so good.
He's got a nice entrance jacket or cape.
Yep. It usually involves underwear and his socks pulled up really high, but I was like, no, not for a live
not for this, but I mean, true wrestler, yeah. It is pretty much underwear you're wearing.
Yes. Okay, so
fantastic.
6.5 is too young for wrestling school, but that could be his future.
Oh yeah, if he's into it. I mean, Matt's son is just as, it sounds just like your son, where they have a huge beanbag that they'll be doing wrestling moves onto. Like Matt will let his kid DDT him onto it or suplex him onto it and stuff. So it sounds like they're going down that same exact path.
Yes, my husband was a high school wrestler, so he tries to incorporate some actual, like I don't know the term, like the wrestling moves.
Yeah,
real
on top
ones. Of like, yeah, on top of like Quinn's, like he wants to do like the super showy moves. So he's getting some training on all sides.
There you go. That's great. Be well rounded.
Yes, and we're also getting him into D&D, so he could be like
he's gonna be like me when he grows.
He's gonna be like you. All week he kept saying, "When are you talking to the wrestler? When are you talking to the wrestler?" That's
awesome.
Fun. Well, Greg and I thought we were like, it just seems like such a natural connection between wrestling and D&D, because so much of it is is the story and the backstory and the characters and
Exactly. Yeah.
how they all connect with each other.
Yeah, I agree. Someone, when I was first like getting all this like steam about me doing D&D and being a wrestler, everyone was like, "Isn't wrestling just like the heaviest form of LARPing that there is?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's a great way to kind of phrase it." Of like, yeah, you go out and just, "I'm gonna get you with this, and I'm gonna drop kick you."
I guess that kind of that is true.
Yeah. So when you got into D&D, you know, so recently in the last 4 years, as you said, like, did you know that there was this crossover, that there was this synergy between the two kind of hobbies?
So I was super into D&D when I was outside of wrestling for that break, and then when I was coming back into wrestling, I was like, what am I gonna do when I come back into it? Like, you know, everyone has like a shtick or a gimmick or something like that, and I was like, what am I? I'm just gonna be Brandon Cutler, just a guy. And so I was like, well, maybe there's a way to like do something with this, like this is like tabletop gaming or D&D in particular, because I was like, I can't think of anyone that had like a dice that was on their tights or like on their rain jacket or something, where it was like just flat out in your face, like, hey, I like D&D. And a lot of wrestlers will do like, they'll put something that they like on, or like they'll do their name in like a classic font, like, oh look, it's Rugrats font, but it's my name or something. So like everyone has like, you know, they've done something like that where you show something else you've liked in your past, like through your wrestling. And so I was like, no one's gone like the D&D route really of like, and this is before I found out about Ember Moon as well and stuff. And so, because I was like, no one flat out has like the Dungeons and Dragons font or something, but it's changed to their name, or, you know, no one's flat out said like that.
Yeah.
And so I was like, maybe I could do like where I'll put like a dice on my tights, or like, you know, maybe the whole like polyhedral dice set on down my leg or something. So, and me and my wife both being into it, she started making my gear when I came back. And so that was something we kind of played with, was like, oh, maybe I'll kind of put that, because then anyone either that'll see all the dice, they'll just think it's just a bunch of shapes, which, well, who cares? It's just a dice, or it's just a design on my tights. Or people that know it will be like, pretty sure that's like, he's got a full set of dice down his leg. Yeah. And like, that's how it started at first. Is some of the guys would come up and be like, hey, like my sister's super into D&D. Like, is that meant to be like dice on your leg? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, oh my God. And they come back the next week and they'd be like, so I told my sister and now she's your biggest fan.
Oh,
so it was like
awesome.
the kind of that where anyone that was into D&D saw me represent D&D and wrestling, instantly favorite wrestler kind of a thing. So I was like, okay, so there's something there. Like that was letting me know, like, all right, I should do a little bit more with it. So it's a little more like, you don't have to question it of like, is he referred to D&D, or is he like, is that just shapes? Is he into geometry?
He's really into polyhedral dice specifically, but not D&D.
So that's where we started doing a little more.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, right. No, I'm like, I like cylinders. I like cones.
I'm really into rods and cones. But then you went into making
rhomboids, man, they get me.
Your costume is your walkout costume is a representation of Tiamat. Is that right?
Yeah. So that was like the furthest my wife and I stepped it up. Was she was starting to make a lot of jackets for a lot of the other guys in AEW, like the Young Bucks and SoCal Uncensored and Cody Rhodes and stuff. And so and I still was just coming out with like whatever merch t-shirt I had. And so I was like, here you are, you're my wife, you're making all these guys these great entrance jackets, but I'm like, I'm chopped liver just because I'm your husband. Like, you know, I get, you know, she's getting payments for these other guys, but I'm like, all right, we got to try and put some time aside and get me something. And she had been sitting on this idea that she wants to make me this dragon jacket for like months and months. And then finally, when she got some time aside, it was 2 full weeks that it took to make it. And yeah, we have every color of the chromatic dragons on there to represent like every head on Tiamat's head. And once I made it, every wrestler, the first day I had it on, was just like, oh my God, they're like, who made this? Is this your wife's work? And they're like, you have the best jacket in all the company now. They're like, I think in all of wrestling, they're like, this is the best jacket. And whether they know what it's about, right? I think so, but I'm biased. Yeah, everyone was just behind it, whether they knew it had any subtle meaning or anything. It's such a spectacle to look at that jacket that they're like, that is cool. And so I was like, okay, this is going off well in both just wrestling world and the D&D world. So
yeah,
I'm loving that jacket.
Tiamat would be proud, I think.
You're a
I'm
big
looking
fan
at
of
a
Tiamat.
picture of it, and so it's got like the spiky like collar? Is this
that part reminds me of like Super Shredder, of like the big spiky shoulder pads, and the dragon kind of. I got the idea from Claudio, who I think is probably in the chat, that's done some like art for D&D, and then also drew me in like a D&D fashion, where there was like a dragon winged shoulder pauldron. And so we kind of got like that somewhat of I just loved that, of like, it looks like you just like took part of a dragon wing and have it as like armor. And so I was like, that's really cool. I'd love to have something like that made. And then my wife had like the entire rest of that kind of like already in mind. And then she just was like, all right, well, if we're gonna do that. And I was like, it'd be cool to have like a cool big neck, because I feel like I got a long neck. So I was like, if I have a big headpiece that goes like around the back of my head and like frames it, I was like, I think that would be cool too. And so she was like, well, if I do another dragon wing kind of on the back there to make it a huge thing. And like, she's just a wizard with like her crafting skills and whatnot. So she made that look, I feel like a boss every time I'm coming out in that. I'm like, yeah, this is final form.
Yeah, a boss, evil, dragon god. Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely embody the essence of Tiamat in that.
She's a boss.
Super cool.
Which also her art, she painted this big old.
Oh my god!
Super into Tiamat at this house.
Yeah. Well, did you play Tyranny of Dragons when it came out?
So I'm running now. I caught wind of it and everything when I was into D&D, and so I was running a game where I read the Hoard of the Dragon Queen and Tyranny of Dragons. I read both of those, and I'm running my players through like a homebrewed version of it, where obviously I'd love to have the big bad bee Tiamat. But that's a whole like my campaign. My main home campaign, I say, is that of very very dragon heavy. All the chromatics and even metallic dragons I have too in that one. Yeah, just to try and get them to that eventual end.
Well, you're in good company there. Joe Manganiello is doing something similar right now with his own kind of homebrew Tyranny of Dragons campaign. It's fantastic, and then eventually you'll be able to show Tiamat off in Avernus and Hell and the 9 Hells. That's even cooler.
Badass. That's where I want to do when they get closer and closer. I want to have Archon be in the campaign as well.
Nice.
That'd just be fun Easter eggs.
For sure.
So you are the dungeon master for all of your games, or do you
pretty much. I have a core group of like gaming friends and my wife that we all play, and we've started probably about 3 different home games with like different collections of these same friends, because it's all like, oh man, these people are gonna be busy for a while. What if we just do another game without them and do like a whole different campaign? And so I've started like 3 different campaigns, but like that's the main one with everyone, is that one of Tiamat. And I'm always the DM in the home ones. And so like everyone, when I was getting like pretty popular with the D&D stuff, everyone's like, oh, what class do you like to play? What are you fighter? Do you like to go rogue? And I was like, well, I'm always the DM, so I guess I could just like make an NPC any one of these, but I'm like, I don't really get to play any of those. It's always I'm everybody else in the game. And then just recently I've been able to be a player on some of these live stream games I've been doing. And so it's weird to just focus on one person for me, but it's also so much fun because I'm like, hey, I get to be a monk for once, like on one of the games, because I've been wanting to do a monk thing for a while.
So did you take on the role of dungeon master because you wanted, because that's kind of what you have to do when you want to play D&D sometimes?
I think that was mostly that. And I think it's just, I was so into it that I just knew the most of everyone that in my group. So it was like, okay, well, who better than like, Brandon? He's the one that got the rest of our group into it. And like, he's been looking up lore just because he wants to look up lore. So like, if someone else did it, I'd probably already know half of the stuff anyway. And it'd kind of take away a little bit. So it'd be like, if they threw this monster at us, I'd be like, oh, I already know like half of that thing's stats. But when you're presenting everyone else to this new world, my whole table group, then everything I throw at them, they're like, oh my God, what's that? And it's that. Yeah. And that's one of the best things I think in D&D is when you throw something new at somebody and they don't know how to react, or they don't know if this is a low level thing or if it's is this the boss? Like, he's got skeletons at us. And it's like, skeletons are kind of but it's like, hey, to them it's just like, oh my god, they're dead, how do we kill a skeleton? So it's like, yeah, it's the first time you ever experience something like that in a game. It's great to see where once you've been exposed and you see how many different monsters there are, and then you see skeletons again, you're like, oh, they're kind of like low level, like just to be minions. Then but when you're playing a game and you don't know that, like, that's great to see how players handle it, of like, oh, this was the setup to, like, this was just the little fight to be for the boss, and they're handling it like it's the boss.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like playing with kids too for the first time, where you're like, you're describing stuff that's really scary, but you're like, hey, that's just a bugbear. It's not that big of a deal, but you're like, but to them, it's the the biggest bad they've ever seen.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun taking them through that, because they just see how much, like, I've gotten into it, and they just trust, like, okay, if he's super into it, there's got to be something cool about it, and then I can show them in that way, like, how cool D&D is. Not like, oh yeah, we're all into it, we all have our own dungeon master guide, we all have the monster manual. They all just have a player's handbook, and that's it. And so everything I'm throwing at them is like new and fresh, and I think that's one of the best ways to experience D&D, is before everyone's been tainted with facing everything.
Do they have any idea how big and bad Tiamat is, and how eager you are to throw her at them?
I think so, because
of all the imagery and statues.
Right? Yeah, I mean, they know what my jacket is and everything. But it's also, when I made that campaign, I made a little like hype video for when they were all choosing their characters, and in the hype video, it flat out says like, "Is Tiamat coming to rise?" and everything in it, and it has like a picture of her. So it's kind of like the overarching theme of this campaign going into it. But it's just like, well, because it was going to be a very heavy dragon campaign anyway. So I was like, well, I should just put it out there that it's like, this is probably going to be the end site here.
Wait, so let's go back a second, because you made a hype video for your campaign.
I want to go back to that.
That's so cool.
It was like a minute. Yeah.
I want to see the hype video. Can we see the hype video?
It's bad. I've watched it. I've watched it like once after I made it, and I was like, I can never show this to the public, but because it's so like, and it's just my voice over some images I googled and searched to show, like, oh, are you gonna pick like a paladin, or will you be a sorcerer? And it shows like a picture of a sorcerer. It's just my voice over like some of the stuff, just to like send out to them, because again, like, they didn't know what even there is. It's like, well, what's a druid? Like, you got to explain everything to them in the beginning. So I was like trying to get a little hype reel going, to be like, look at, this is the town you came in. And I put little sound effects of, just like some town sounds and stuff in there, just because I was like, well, that's kind of the campaign I want to have, is, when we're playing, I'll have like a little speaker playing some background music or some town sounds and stuff like that. And so I was like, I gotta have them experiences the best they can on their first thing, because then that's how you get them hooked, right? Like, if you sit down and you got all these sounds and you got lighting effects and stuff, then
totally.
They're gonna be like, oh my god, this game is awesome. You're right, bro. It's like, not every game is like this, but like, that's how I want my games to be.
Yeah, I feel like if you don't throw dragons in a game with new players, like they'll be a little disappointed. I mean, maybe
it's in the name of the game.
Yeah, right. That
they
too.
always do seem to come out with like, well, I thought there'd be dragons, but
yeah,
sometimes there are.
That's true.
Sometimes there aren't.
I do love that idea, though. I mean, with so much video and editing software out there, like, we've talked a lot about folks having a session 0 with their players, and just talking through the campaign, and whatever safety tools you're going to use and things like that, and just kind of set the tone. But like, I even like the idea of having this hype video lead up to the session 0, right. And then get folks excited for it. It's genius.
We did do a session 0 too, for everyone to pick characters, and like, because that just helps when everyone's together and you're making characters, because then you're not just coming into the first game like, either, oh, my guy's a lot like his guy, or like, how would we have ever met? Like, we are all such far away people from each other. Like, so it is nice to have like, and then it helps people pick a class too, I think, because then they'll be like, oh, okay, if I could kind of piggyback on that person, if they're that, maybe I've known them, or I've been in the same guild as them, and I'm just this person in the guild. And so it helps some people that aren't so confident as well, like, just like piggyback on someone and be like,
yeah, no, that's important. Your audio is going out a little bit. We might be
Yeah,
having
it's cutting out a little.
some bandwidth
Oh no, he's
issues
freezing.
there. And now you're frozen.
Yeah.
Oh no. Hello. That happened
Hello?
a couple of minutes ago. Hopefully it was.
I see I'm been a little.
Are you back?
Hello, I hear you guys.
Hi. Okay.
There we go.
Froze a little.
Yes.
No
My
worries.
stuff.
Tiamat.
It must be Tiamat.
Must be Tiamat.
I blame her, as I do with all the things that she does.
It's the doing.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that
No,
you have some
it's
live stream
Bahama.
games. Oh yeah. You're doing some live
Yeah,
streams?
I've played a couple with. Yeah, I've played one with Lady Tiefling that she runs on her Twitch channel. I've played as a player, and then we'll be doing another one coming up. I think tomorrow, actually. Yeah.
Nice.
Oh,
That'll
cool.
that'll be a fun one. So I get to be a player now during this pandemic.
Yay.
You were also on Droam and Defiance Wrestling with the folks at Hyper RPG. I was wanting them to do that show because I loved this idea of wrestling and D&D being so closely related, and then as you being the bridge between those two. Like, how did that go?
That was so much fun to do it, and I love that. That's the term you're using too, is the bridge. Because when I've done a couple of these, I did that with Hyper RPG, and I did another thing with Geek and Sundry. And when I had meetings with them, I was like, what I wanted to do with being a wrestler and a D&D enthusiast, I was like, I want to be kind of like the personification of like a bridge between these two things. So I was like, I always want to do stuff like that of like streams or content where it is something with like, let's play D&D, but like let's make it wrestling. And so when I saw the hype video for D&DW with Hyper RPG, I was like, oh my god, I was like, I need to be on that show, or I need to watch it or something. I was like, that just sounds like so much fun. And so they instantly were like, hey, any actual live wrestlers want to be on this, we'd love to have you. I was like, me, let me do it, I want to do it.
Yeah, because you had gotten some notoriety in the D&D community about a year ago, right? Was that like 9 months ago, a year ago?
Yeah.
With some Twitter back and forth with your opponent, who is kind of
MJF.
MJF was I don't want to say dork shaming, but I said it. So
yeah, well, I mean, essentially, it's pretty much what he was doing. We were set to have a match on the very first TNT show, Dynamite. It was gonna be me versus him, and so he took to the internet like he does, and just like attacks people in his way. And so he posted, a gym selfie of him looking all swole, saying, I don't play Dungeons and Dragons, pretty much implying if you're in shape, you don't play Dungeons and Dragons, kind of a thing. And so I remember I saw it while I was like out grocery shopping or something, because I remember as soon as I get home, I need to reply to this with like me in shape, saying I do play Dungeons and Dragons, kind of a thing, of like to counterpoint it. And it just took off so much that we were on like the front page of just Reddit in general that day, of like somebody had posted the caption of like something about like fitness gatekeeping, something about gatekeeping in one of the communities and things. And it blew up in the D&D world. It blew up in the wrestling world too, just because it's also that this new show's coming on TNT. It's a new wrestling league. It's not just WWE anymore. It's going to be AEW as well on pay-per-view, or on cable TV. Yeah. And so like it was kind of catching a lot of like just views everywhere. And then, a lot of the big names in the D&D community, Joe Manganiello posted himself on the cover of Muscle and Fitness. I do play Dungeons and Dragons too. Yeah, Matt Mercer jumped in on it and had some fun.
Sadly, I did not do that with my body.
Where's your selfie? You should have been up there.
Right.
I do play Dungeons and Dragons.
It's like me holding a plate of pasta. I'm just like, I do. It's me.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
But it definitely struck a nerve, and that was like my first introduction to all of that. And I think what might have been missed, and maybe you can give us some insight on this, was that he was playing a part, getting the guff up a little bit on purpose because of the heel face thing. I don't think everybody kind of got that right away, which is good, because that is why I think people responded in the way they did. But how much of that was pre-planned or known that he was going to do this kind of taunting?
Yeah, so I mean, in wrestling, especially nowadays, it's always the like, oh, you gotta kind of try and keep it real kind of a thing. And so that was that was all just winged, and I responded to it. Like he didn't hit me up or say anything like, hey, I'm thinking about posting this. He posted it, and like it's kind of in wrestling, like I took his like hint of like, it's because he's facing me at that thing.
Yeah.
Why else would he be talking about Dungeons and Dragons? It's to get what we call as like heat in wrestling, of like you want to get people to backlash at you and hate you. And so it was like, now is my time to queue up as like the good guy in this, to to reply to that kind of a thing. Like, he didn't tag me or he didn't tag anybody in it, he just posted that out there kind of a thing. And so it's kind of like that, of like, oh yeah, you want to generate a little buzz on the internet, and like so that's kind of what it was meant and implied for, and it worked. But yeah, I think a lot of people saw it as like this normal, because I mean, out of context, you just see a jacked guy in a gym saying that, and if you don't know his background, you don't know he's a wrestler, you don't know he's coming into this feud with a Dungeons and Dragons enthusiast, then you just see that for what it is, of buff guy, caption says I don't play Dungeons and Dragons. You think, oh, you get triggered and you go off. Yeah, you go off, and then some people I saw were trying to explain in the comments of like, this is a wrestling feud, guys. This isn't real life. Like, this guy's a character, and this is what he's trying to do and stuff.
Wait,
he's
it was
wrestling
real.
a guy. Yeah, it's like he's wrestling a guy that's into Dungeons and Dragons. So it's like, if he posts it like I don't play Overwatch or something, it'd be like, no, he's going against a guy that's super into Overwatch, or whatever it might have been. It was, yeah. That's what it struck as, because again, he didn't tag me in it to say like, to put it too on the nose of like, because I'm feuding with you, Brandon. It was, he posted that, and I got the hint to be like, okay, let me respond to it. And then, like you saw, it did blow up because it did have that that trigger sense to it. But I mean, in some ways it's good that it gets some views, and then in some that I'm like, oh man, some people are taking this really harshly right now.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it netted you a lot of new fans from the D&D.
Yeah, it did. And still, the D&D world, he gets tagged in so much D&D stuff too because of that.
Yeah, revenge
totally backfired on
him. Yeah, because again, which something I honestly do want to do is, everyone wants him to be seen playing D&D now. And
I was just gonna ask, can we get him to a game?
I'm like, I think I could probably convince him in a little bit, but yeah, that's something I would definitely want to do, because I think that would be very entertaining, is play someone who'd like begrudgingly doesn't want to play D&D and like force them to play D&D as a humorous thing, not like to like take it too like, oh, they're forcing him. It's more like, no, this is supposed to be fun and entertaining, and yeah.
You don't want to put him in a full Nelson and be like, no, you're gonna roll that die.
Right? Yeah. Just give him a loaded die. It's just always one.
Oh, that's the real revenge right there. Be like, get him excited about it, but all of his rolls fail. Oh man, that'd be so good.
Great.
I love that concept of heat, though. I don't think I've ever really heard that explained before. And it reminds me of like Grand Theft Auto and those games where you would get the heat level of the authorities coming after you. But I wonder if there's some way. I wonder if there's some way we can translate that into D&D mechanics or something like that, so that when you're coming to a new town and you're getting good heat by doing these quests or doing these activities.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he can be good, and it's definitely bad.
Yeah, right, Shelly.
Yeah, it's definitely like a performer thing of like getting heat is like if you're trying to get like you're trying to become like the bad guy and get like a boo, and then like it could also be like you're getting you're building up heat or steam if the crowd's just like on fire and they want to see the good guy eventually do something, kind of a thing.
Yeah. I wonder if it would be almost kind of like getting inspiration, but different. I like the idea of like the party generating heat in kind of like a good or a bad way.
It especially works if your party is all evil people too.
Yeah. So when you wrestle, are you ever the bad guy?
No, so in wrestling, it's everyone's kind of along in the storylines. It's you're a good guy until you've done something where you do something so despicable that like they call it you turn heel or something, where you switch to now you're a bad guy in the show,
Hollywood Hogan,
or vice versa, where you're a bad guy and you do something that's like noble and good all of a sudden, and then now you've turned into like a baby face where you're now the good guy kind of a thing. So it's very much like Game of Thrones did that with a lot of their characters. Jamie Lannister was in the beginning, he was a bad guy. He was getting heat and all that, and then like he did a couple of cool noble things and starts becoming like a crowd favorite and starts becoming like everyone loves him in the story now. And so it was like, oh, okay, he kind of turned a little more good guy. And so like Game of Thrones is actually like, they have a lot of those where people turn bad and good, and there's a lot of gray areas in there. But that's a show that just comes straight to mind when, you could turn good and bad in a thing. But
I wonder if that's something people could do as again, I'm keep bringing this back to like tips and tricks for D&D, but like no one really gets to do that. Oh yeah, like alignment is a perfect thing, like a paladin turning into a blackguard and things like that.
Yeah, that's how I kind of even think of how everyone's like, oh, you're a good guy, but you have a Tiamat jacket. So it's like, that's why you keep losing matches, is your alignment isn't set up right. And like, kind of true. Either I should get a Bahamut jacket, or maybe I should go bad guy.
Maybe it's like it's a sign of like, or a foreshadowing of what's to come for your storyline. I don't know.
You've been evil this whole time.
There is something I want to do. We do this series on YouTube called Being the Elite, and it's kind of a thing that was going on, and why AEW is even a thing is because of this show we put out every week on YouTube for free. It's also where we just do like extra character building for all the people in wrestling.
Yeah.
And so an idea I had when my wife made this jacket was, I was like, I wonder if this could be like in D&D, of many objects you might give to your players, of like, I wonder if this thing could start talking to me and like, maybe guiding me in certain ways or something. So like, I'm like, that's an idea I've been sitting on ever since I've made the jacket. But I'm like, what if this thing starts like, somewhat controlling me or something?
Because you got the skin of an evil goddess on you. It's going to have some effect.
Yeah. So I'm like, maybe there might be something kind of I'll do on that show.
I mean, you could call upon Tiamat to help you, and
that's true too.
Or may not ask for something in return.
Yeah, that's good.
So now I'm thinking, okay, here's another idea for our
This is a pitch meeting.
Like, I think we can work together on this. Tips for wrestlers to build characters and storylines using things from D&D.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and just like that. Yeah.
So, and then tips for building story and characters in D&D from wrestlers.
Oh yeah, there's a lot that could cross over, like how we've been saying. Just like that, I've made a jacket that isn't anywhere in D&D we made, but then like it's something that could honestly belong in D&D, like the jacket of Tiamat, where it grants you what maybe, I don't know, a breath weapon of like all 5 of the different heads or something. I've thought of that a lot, of like how I can incorporate my jacket into the kind of D&D or something.
Right.
But it's, if you could even take, like, you can look through the Dungeon Master's Guide and look at items and be like, ooh, I wonder if I can do something like that in wrestling, or kind of make a character based around that ideology, or like that's kind of essentially what I think when I see Ember Moon, is like, she's a live D&D character in the wrestling world. Like, like I'm more of like, I'm a guy that likes D&D, and like I feel like she's a D&D character,
right?
Like
when she's like fire sorcerer kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Seeing that, but I'm like, yeah, you could easily do that, or a D&D character going the vice versa route of, you can make Darby Allin, if that's your guy from AEW, if you love him, you can make him in D&D easily and make him like a warlock or something like that. When I did that Geek and Sundry thing, I kind of thought that through, of a couple of people who what would they be? Like Jimmy Havoc is a very like dark kind of a person, so I made him a warlock, and I was like, oh man, like because he just loves like bringing pain to people is like his whole shtick. So I was like, oh yeah, that kind of like screams a warlock of some kind, and like, yeah, you could definitely flesh a lot of these characters out. I saw some people did, like Chris Jericho, somebody made a whole stat sheet for him a little while ago. And they made him a stat sheet where he could be, if you're a warlock, he could be your patron kind of a thing, and
be your own patron.
Yeah, he can grant you some boons and stuff if you praise Jericho.
I mean, and then you go back to class, Andre the Giant, you can just basically use his giant stats, and then you're done.
Oh yeah. Easily, yeah, definitely. And then they have like the folk hero background, which is, I mean, you could tweak that very slightly, and boom, you got like you're pretty much a wrestler instead of just a folk hero. Is, oh yeah, he's known around for wrestling, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and that's why I love that concept of a D and a wrestling thing happening within the D&D setting. Because it's all the tools are there.
Yeah, and everyone has like the classic, like, oh, maybe there's an underground fighting pit so we could get into fights with like people and like, still get to fight and not always have to be against monsters and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's like that could always be a route too. It's like there's an underground wrestling league you guys got to go to, and like now you got to try and like still fight people but not hurt them, like how we were doing on D&DW, where it's like, oh, if you mess up, you legitimately hurt your partner in the match, kind of a thing. So it's like you could challenge your players to that of like, you guys want to try and be wrestlers and make money, while you're in town, or because then there could be ramifications there if you legitimately hurt someone in this wrestling league. Then like, oh, maybe they were part of like a legitimate gang or something, and now they got a bounty on you or something.
Right, or there's some like chaotic neutral promoter character who's like trapping people and being like, all right, now you must perform in this specific way without hurting each other.
That's true.
But then the characters have to bust their way out or something like that at the end of the session. You can do tons of fun one shots like that.
That's true too. Yeah, somehow strip them of all their weapons and stuff and leave it where it's just punches. And there's a lot of fun ways to kind of like incorporate all that.
So I hear you've got a bunch of minis. Your collection is expanding. And your wife has been painting them. How many do you think you have?
Oh, I can't even put a number on that. That's a lot.
Oh my God.
Because we've backed the Reaper Kickstarters, the last like 2 or 3, and we've gotten multiple set. Like we did the core set like 3 or 4 times on the last one, just because we're like, oh, I'd love to have 2 of that dragon. I'd love to have 1 of those. And so like I could kind of even show you in the back under here is just bins of all minis. Here's assorted minis that are just free out of their boxes. And this shelf here is even more down, and those 2 bins are what Reaper just kind of sent me some more dragons and things. And then there's just some kind of throughout the house that my wife has painted that like we just like she's done a couple dragons that look so cool that it's just kind of like art around the house now. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, and that Tiamat that I showed you earlier, she's painted. She's got tons of stuff. And then I have a whole nother one of those rollers full of Dwarven Forge.
Oh,
so
nice.
Been going kind of nuts on a little bit of everything.
You and Ember Moon.
Your games that you play are all in person?
With my group. These last couple of days I've been chatting with my group about like, I wonder if there's a way we could play like, because I love having like actual terrain or like even the erasable mat. That's the first ways we played, so like I've just loved it. And like I love doing some streams with everybody, but like for my home game I love having like physical things. And so just last night I came upon the thing called like that Vorpal board, where it's a way to play online with people. And still have like, if I set up a Dwarven Forge little scenario, you can point your camera at it and they all get feed of that. And so you could still very much do a fight with physical objects. It's just they would all be telling you like, oh, move my guy here or something. That's kind of cool. I might try on that.
I've been definitely trying to I mean, you need to kind of set up your cameras in the right way so that you can kind of share that. But I've been thinking about doing that for board games as well as for D&D to kind of still get that tactile, tactical information that you need when you're doing that stuff. But then, of course, there's still, if you do a theater of the mind style, you can still always just do it through conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. I just love that. The physical, like I hate rolling like dice on the computer where you just click and it rolls it. I'm like, no, I want to physically roll dice. I have too many as well, so I need to get use out of these dice. But just something about like physically rolling it too, that I love that about D&D. There's just dice is also an addicting part of D&D is rolling it and collecting them.
I agree. I like to collect them myself.
Yeah,
but then I only end up using like the same 5, but I have hundreds of them, but I'm just like, nope, these are my babies.
These are my lucky 5.
I've been using a bunch like based on the character of like if the character's dressed in a certain color, I'll have a dice that's like that, or like if they're like if I'm using an ogre and like they got green skin, I'll be like, oh, okay, I'll use green dice or something on that. Or big boss, I use metal dice. That's just something I've kind of enjoyed doing myself. Of like, ooh, it's a boss that needs a heavy dice.
The problem with the heavy dice is always that they make little pock marks onto anything you roll it upon. So
you gotta have a dice tray for those.
Gotta have a dice tray.
A nice padded dice tray.
Yeah.
So are you and Denise playing any games while you're stuck in quarantine? Or I mean, I guess you could play if you have the essentials kit. You can do some one-on-one.
That's true. D&D. We haven't been doing much D&D. I got to do a couple of live streams, but being that we have 2 kids, like we've even all of our home campaigns, I'm like, well, we could continue it if I just play, because I'm like, I don't know how we would get our kids to, D&D is like 3 hours. So I'm like, they don't watch a half hour of a movie.
How old are you kids?
2 and 4.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I remember those dark times.
Yeah, we've realized that of like trying to play online, they're going to be going crazy. So it's really only one of us can play and the other would have to watch them. So we've been trying to kind of separate and do that. But I mean, we've been just deep diving Animal Crossing this whole time.
That's the way to do it. My kids are 6 and 8 now. So they're just at that point where they still have the attention span problem, especially my younger daughter. So it's all about having bite-sized kind of things. Like, all right, we're going to play for, half hour or 45 minutes, then pick it up again the next day and things like that.
Or with our kids, they won't leave us alone for more than 2 minutes. So it's more of like, if we were playing, they'd be running in, like she's watching them right now. Otherwise they'd be running in behind me and then
they start, at that age, they're eating the miniatures, they're putting them in their mouths, they're breaking them. And you're like,
my 4-year-old, she's good with that. So we let her play with them, but we only let her play with them away from brother, who's 2 years old. So he'd be doing that. So we say that if he's too young, don't let him have dice, but she'll just sit there and she'll play around with the dice. And I just bought her a little ducky dice that I saw on the internet. So I was like, I gotta get that. Yeah, there's a bunch of cute stuff. So I'm like, I'll get her hooked on that early as well, start her dice hoard.
Yep. Like a little baby dragon.
Sounds like mother, like daughter there for sure.
Oh yeah.
Well, it sounds like your wife's name is Denise.
Yeah,
I feels like she's the unsung hero of this whole thing. So let's sing her praises a little bit by
definitely
making that jacket, by painting the miniatures. I just think that's so cool that you guys do that together.
And watching the kids, so
watching the kids while you're talking about
it. She makes my gear. She makes a lot of the guys' gear in the company. She's done my art. This is my latest shirt for AEW. So she's the artist behind here, where she put a little custom dragon for me.
Sweet.
Yeah, she's done it.
She does that.
Yeah, let me show you. I got a pair of my gear here where she's the one that did the whole the dice down the leg. Yeah.
God.
Yeah, she's done a lot.
I can't even imagine how something like that gets made.
No, right? It's like,
not crafting.
Where do you start?
I don't even know.
You go to the crafting table and then you just pick the thing and then it gets made, right?
Right, yeah, like Animal Crossing.
Craft more. Yes.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah, she's awesome with everything she does, and it's great that how we're both into everything. Like she's into wrestling with me, she's into D&D with me. Like, so we only just push each other further into these fandoms. Of like, she's like, hell, I make gear, or I can make like your gear if you get back into wrestling. I get back into it, and we're putting dice on my gear, and I'm getting a shirt design, and she's all, oh, I could draw you a dragon. So she does it, and we submit it to everybody, and they're like, why isn't she doing more designs for our team? It's like, well, she's also doing gear for like 5 of the guys, so can only put it in so many different areas before her time is completely filled up.
Right.
And she's a mom, and
yeah,
takes up a little bit
on top of that.
And has to paint the minis.
Yep.
And has to paint the minis.
Yeah,
awesome.
And it's hard too, because there's sometimes where I've had just white minis on the board because it's like, oh, they're going that route, and we don't got those minis painted. But oh well, like it's still fun. And like I did a huge skeleton mini once as a big baddie for the session, and he was just pure white. But I was like, who cares? Like it's still fun. They still get the visual of it.
There's something creepy about that too.
I know. I was gonna say. I feel like that's kind of a cool story hook too. Why has all his color drained?
That's true.
It's like Banicula draining the juice from the carrots. Best sign off reference there ever. Anybody remember Banicula? Anyhow, it's been really great talking to you and picking your brain. I feel like we could continue to talk for hours and hours. And so we should definitely have you on. And I'd love to talk to Denise as well and find out how she does all the stuff that she does.
Yeah, she does a lot.
So during this time, AEW, I guess, is not performing, right?
Well, we're trying to still have somewhat of new content, even in like quarantine. It's just like a ring and like the two guys. So like every Wednesday, we're still trying to pump out new content, even any regulations or rules that are still getting put out.
Mm-hmm.
I think they even still just recorded a bunch of extra matches the other day because things are just getting tighter and tighter. So there still might be new content every Wednesday on TNT. Otherwise, we do a YouTube show where everyone could just film bits on their phone, and we just put it all together and put it on YouTube. And that's just free on YouTube, called Being the Elite. You can catch me on both of those, or any kind of D&D streams I'll be randomly doing during this quarantine too. I'll be trying to get as much of that in as I can.
Sweet. So yeah, we'll follow you on Twitter. Is that the best place to kind of find out about those?
Yeah, definitely. And that's just Brand Cutler, BRAN Cutler. I'm that on all across everything, on Instagram, that, emails, everything.
Awesome. Well, hopefully you got a whole bunch of people from the D&D community now following you if they haven't been already. And now we got to get more wrestling folks into playing some D&D and continue to be that bridge.
We share your mission. Let's do that.
Which I get that every now and then. Some people hit me up on Twitter with like, "Hey, I just bought like the starter kit, or I just bought my first the D&D book. Like I'm gonna start today." And I get a lot of those first time stories, and I'm like, mission is being accomplished.
Yes.
Like this is what I want. Is more so that of bringing wrestling people over to D&D, because I'm like, everyone's into wrestling. Everyone knows like a Macho Man or something, but I'm like, not everyone knows Tiamat, which that needs to change.
There you go.
You are doing your part in increasing D&D's heat, so I appreciate it.
There you go. Very nice.
Awesome.
Call back, Greg.
Thank you so much, Brandon. You're the best.
Thank you, guys.
Love to talk to you again soon.
Awesome.
For sure.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right. Well, that is it for our audio capture of that. Go ahead and you can stay on there for a second, Brandon, while I tell everybody we are going to take a break. We're going to say bye to you, Shelly.
Yes. Goodbye, everyone.
And then I will be back on for the next hour talking to Jeremy Crawford all about some sage advice. So we're going to take a break right now and go to that. Sound like a plan, everybody?
Yes.
All right. Thanks again. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Brandon.
Thank you,
Bye,
guys.
Greg.
Back in a couple minutes. Bye, Shelly.